psychiatric disorders like anxiety are mislabels, they're misdirections. It's really that our bodies are now in states of threat because we haven't developed the skill set of co-regulating with each other. And it's not even that we develop a skill set, we functionally develop skill sets not to co-regulate. That's our normal mode, is to connect. And yet societal demands basically force us into feeling threatened or states of threat that interfere with this ability to co-regulate with one another.
Let's talk a little bit about when there, like, one state in society is anxiety and fear, and what's our remedy? Because it seems the remedy is built into our bodies, and we need to read the manual, which you gave us, and apply it. So how do we create safe spaces? Because everybody who facilitates processes knows that creating a safe space is the foundation of any kind of healing work. So how do we do that?
Let me start with this and then hand it off to Deb, because Deb is our therapist. She's our clinician, and I want to make sure that people don't think that I do clinical work. I come up with ideas, and other people like Deb actually put it into practice. But let's kind of even reframe your question, and that is, you're already saying that we need help to, in a sense, reach our core of who we are. We have to, in a sense, honor what our body evolved to do. And it evolved to regulate itself in the presence of others. So it meant that it was co-regulating with others. And this concept of mind versus body was another form of internal co-regulation, where bottom up and top down kind of meet together in the brainstem, and they share a vision of what it is to be a healthy organism. It's in us. It's our part of our plan of health. And what we have done is we literally have not honored what the body is always trying to teach us. So people who suffer from what we used the term earlier, anxiety or chronic stress, they will tell you that they know they're doing something wrong, that it's not what they want to do. They can't tell you what they want to do. But the body has this program, and it doesn't mean that we can't inhibit that program for periods of time to do our cognitive learning, to do our work, to create the resources. But we have to still literally understand that our system needs time on which it's not under those types of demands. And Deb, in the world of therapy, has it's again her intuitive, instinctual unfolding of these intuitive ideas. She's able to translate them into actually direct practices. And it's really been quite impressive to see the effectiveness when you can move it into a language that both therapists and clients can understand.
So when I think about our clients and sitting with clients and coming into connection, I like to talk about the fact that our nervous systems are having a conversation, and it's our job to tune into that conversation. And then I think it's part of our work is to help our clients speak that language as well. And so we keep following this back and forth conversation that's happening below the level of awareness. We bring it into explicit awareness so that we can actually have that. And, I like to say I'm helping my client become a more active operator of their nervous system, right? They understand it, they befriend it, and then they can begin to shape it, to have more of what we call ventral on board, right? And I truly do believe that we all have a home in ventral, that our nervous system knows how to get there, that the pathways have often been covered up because of our experience. My work as a therapist is to help uncover those pathways and walk those pathways with my client so that they become more used to being on that path. And so that's our home. We have a home in ventral that we long to be in, and our nervous system knows how to get to. And so let's help uncover those pathways. And in order to do that, we have to reduce the warnings that our nervous system is getting, from inside our bodies. We get warnings or welcome, right? And then from the environment, we get warnings and welcomes. And then as Steve was talking about, this beautiful connection between nervous systems, we get a warning or a welcome. And that's that co-regulation piece, which, as a clinician, it's our responsibility to be regulated so that we can offer that regulating experience and energy to our clients. And that, I think, is one of the real gifts of Steve's work, is understanding that this is not something for clients, right? This is something clinicians need to understand and embody, and then we bring to our clients and we travel with our clients. But it's first what we have to understand about our own nervous systems. And I think there's such a power in that, right? In understanding and knowing how to get to my own regulated place, and then understanding when I've left regulation and how to get back there, because that's what happens to us all. You think about the clients you've seen, over the past week, and think about the moments when, oh, that was a bit messy, right? Because I sort of lost my anchor in ventral. I had a moment when I felt a little bit of that overwhelming sympathetic, what do I do? Or that dorsal, I give up, nothing's ever going to change, right? And then we come back to ventral and go, oh, wait a minute, I can notice the small things that are changing, and I can hold the hope with my client. This happens all the time. And so understanding that helps me, do what Steve said, to not create a story of blame and shame and judging, but understand the story of my biology, right? And then I can do something with that understanding so that I'm more able with that particular client to stay anchored and offer them that missing experience that is often the missing experience with trauma survivors of safe co-regulation.
Right.
Let's add a little bit onto that. And Deb's saying something else in addition to what she said. So there's a backstory here. She's saying that the state that the therapist is in affects the client. And we live in a world where people have learned to deliver therapy as if it were a pill. So it became manualized. And what Deb is saying, our bodies are so clever. We react to other people's presence. And if they're not authentic, if they're not truly supportive, they won't be good clinicians. So I have this kind of like a code word I use. I say in this world, there are some super co-regulators. And when we meet them, we know it. And there are others, and I put myself in that other category, that are, quote, good enough. And that is that, we can interact with the other people, they feel good with us. But a super co-regulator can walk into the presence, the space of someone who's dysregulated, and suddenly the portal opens and the co-regulation can begin.
Yeah. And that comes through that beautiful neuroceptive pathway, right? That below the level of awareness, you just feel held in an energy, an environment, an experience, and your nervous system knows it. So your brain may say, oh, I don't know, or not sure, or a different story, but your nervous system knows it and begins to come into that space and begins to allow, oh, maybe, right?
And maybe circling back to one thing that you said that maybe completes that also is when you said before, maybe for our listeners to define a bit more, what's a warning from inside my body and what's a warning from my environment? Maybe we can make this more explicit. I think it's
sure. Yeah. If you listen inside your body in this moment, and if everybody listens inside their body, they may find a place. We'll look for a warning and a welcome. If you look for a warning, you may find a place that feels a bit numb or a bit too excited. I've got sort of a throat that keeps going and coming, so that's a warning to me. It's like, oh, this is, so I can feel that. So, what do you find? Do you find a warning inside? When you check inside, what do you notice?
Basically, what I notice is that inherently relatively calm. It doesn't mean that I lived a calm life, but I start realizing it much more in others where they can't sit still. They walk around, they create a narrative, they create a action which they have to fulfill. So they get mobilized and now they have to complete something. But what I kind of like to talk about in terms of what you're saying is that we live in a world that really has treated us from a young age to tell us not to listen to those cues coming from our body. So in a sense, turn off the feedback, sit still, do more of this, you only have another hour of this work to do. Basically teaching us at an early age to develop a skill set of dissociation. And when are we dissociating from what our body has been telling us? Now, you can develop I would use the term a happy harmony, where you are aware of what your body's telling you, but you just basically shift priority. You say, I have to get this done. So you acknowledge what you need to do. I can't eat right now. I have to do this. Or for younger children, it's like, can't go to the bathroom at this moment. You start developing a certain understanding of your biological processes, and you kind of become the master of it. You control it, but you listen to it. And what I'm really saying is the world that we have, all of us, whether we're Europe or Israel or the US, our reaction was sit on it, inhibit those feelings. They're just going to get in the way of what you need to do. Now, that's a very interesting set of priorities. But what it does is creates the collective diseases or stress-related, whatever we want to call them. They get lists of where our body is now, in a sense, refusing to be compliant. But the whole issue is not being aware of our body. And if we go through this, reframing it in terms of tells that are, or telltales within our body, we react to cues in the body and outside the body through basically this process that I labeled as neuroception. The interesting part about neuroception, we lack the awareness of the source of the cues, but we are aware of the bodily reactions. That's how your therapy works. You work from there and you get people to sit still for a moment and not create a story of why their body feels that way, but to feel that body. So they understand that body is now in a state that has great accessibility or vulnerability. It can all be the same. And then the narrative falls in. And this becomes, again, one of the important points, why there's so much anxiety or mobilization or stress-related disorders, or why people are in therapy. And that is sitting still or being accessible is vulnerability to them. And a healthy person says, stillness, sitting still is really where I want to be. But the person who has that complex trauma history, when they experience that same, in a sense, their body is now no longer mobilized, they're really experiencing great threat. So accessibility means something different based upon your own personal clinical history.
Yeah. And, trauma survivors are taught fairly explicitly to not see what is happening, to not feel what is happening, and what they're feeling is not correct. Yeah. So there's an explicit teaching of that to trauma survivors when you grow up in a dangerous world and in a dangerous family. And so to come back into connection with that is the slow and patient process, to say, your body is sending you a warning, and usually it's the big warning we can feel first. We don't feel the subtle ones. And then is there a welcome in there? And often in the beginning, it's a place perhaps of no feeling, or a place that doesn't have that intense pain on the inside, because, we leave our bodies for good reason, right? And so learning how to safely come back in is a very slow process. And sometimes the body feelings that we start with are the ones here, because that's where we live, right? So I have a headache, okay, people can feel headaches because it's here, or I can feel, there's a bit of warmth, so it's interesting to explore coming back into connection with the body. So, that's the internal. And then Thomas, you asked about the environmental, right? As we started today, I had this lovely sense of being welcomed into your space, because for my nervous system, your space is very lovely and welcoming. That environment was like, I could feel myself there in it, right? So for me, it wasn't even my environment, which I do love. It was your environment that was sending me a welcome. And then my warning in my environment, I had to close my window because they're doing some roofing project. And so it was this hammering out there. It was like, oh no, right? And then if we go to the between, which is where we started with co-regulation, that sense of a welcome or a warning between, right? I actually am trying to find a warning right now, because I just feel very connected to the two of you, and my nervous system feels very welcomed, right? There's a sense of, the smile on Steve's face, your beautiful welcome face that I hadn't seen until a little while ago. But there's this welcome that comes. The warnings we often feel with, in the between space is somebody may look away when we're talking, or look down and be focused on something else. And that's an automatic warning that comes in. It's like, oh, what just happened? There's a disconnect that happens. So, for people listening, maybe they'll look at our faces and say, is there a welcome, right? Is there a welcome that they feel here? And then think of people who they are in relationship with, and think of what's the warning, not what they say, not the words, but what's the autonomic warning. It may be the tone of voice. It may be the way they come too close or distance. Those are the sorts of welcomes and warnings that we're always looking for. And what I've come to recognize is that they're always both present. And so it's not that I don't ever have warnings. It's that my cues of safety is what I call them, but my welcomes outweigh the cues of danger. And when that happens, when that equation is in that direction, then I can feel regulated, safe enough to come into connection. So that's really what I'm working with.